Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming by to our session today. Today, we're going to talk about how SEO has evolved in 2024. What are some of the tips and tricks in terms of actually utilizing the platform? And yeah, we'll go into how you can actually maximize revenue when you're looking at the channel. So, quick note about myself. I'm Saf, one of the directors at Online Marketing Gurus. I look after a lot of our enterprise strategies. So I've built strategies for brands like Vodafone, LG, T2, a lot of different areas, but get quite technical into the nitty gritty around those areas. And yeah, we'll talk a lot about the learnings and insights that we've had from those different client experiences over the years as well. Also done a lot of training for some tech platforms, so platforms like PayPal, Shopify, BigCommerce, and so forth as well. So first thing I wanted to dive into is how has SEO evolved in 2024? And there's been some really significant changes when we look at it in the last 3-4 years in particular. One of the big trends that we've found just in digital overall is really the rising cost of paid media. We've seen the cost of Google ads go up by about 25 to 30% compounding year on year for the last 3 years. We've seen the cost of Meta go up by about 85+% since the iOS 14.5 update around privacy. So some of the big takeaways that we're seeing is that there's been a shift in terms of companies. Really looking a lot more at direct owned media channels. So things like SEO, SMS campaigns, email marketing, but direct owned traffic is becoming more and more important. We're also seeing areas like SEO getting a bit of a squeeze as more and more competitors are coming into that space as well. One of the big things that's also come about is the cookieless future and looking at kind of the death of third-party cookies and tracking. And again, that's resulted in a market where this is the reality that we're dealing with now. So it's more how do you adapt around it and looking at those more owned channels rather than third-party paid media channels becoming more important. AI has changed the landscape, and I think that 2 years ago, the thought around the market is that, at least from a kind of Google or Bing standpoint, it would have much more of an impact than it has. But when we look at commercial searches, so for example, here's a search around buy wedding dress, what you'll notice is if you look at the Bing search result on the left and the Google search result on the right, they're actually largely the same. And so when you look at actual intent-oriented buying-related search like buy wedding dress or looking at product categories, it hasn't really changed a whole lot. It is still important, and the strategies that you can use to succeed in terms of SEO generally, it actually does help in terms of the AI side of things when you're looking at ChatGPT 4's results from new Bing, or now it's been rebranded to Microsoft Copilot. And we'll go through some of the strategies around it, but these types of natural language searches only accounts for about 1.7% of total search volume. So I think it's good to prepare for it now and looking at creating that educational content that genuinely drives value to the end user. But I wouldn't expect that to be a big part of your traffic mix, at least for now. We've also noticed Google rolling out way more updates than ever. So if we look at the last 17 years prior to 2017, there's been more updates in the last 4 years than the last 17 years combined. Why is that happening? A big part of the reason around that is there's been a big shift in user behavior and people are starting to use the internet differently. So Google's then trying to adapt around how does it then drive value and stay relevant for the end user. I don't know if any of you have seen this, but Google had an API leak, and it was probably the biggest leak in Google history, at least that I can remember. But Google's search internal engineering documents got leaked. And the funny thing is that some of the things on the leaks directly contradict what they directly say publicly a lot of the time. So it can be quite interesting. It's quite a long leak. So I've just summarized some of the key takeaways around it. But some of the things that really stood out to us is, number one, we've seen that link building still matters, particularly the frequency and recency plays a big role. When you're looking at content, always update it with dates. So if you've got a piece of content from 2022, 2023, whatnot, don't just change the date. You can, but you want to add a little bit of content to update it, but updating that content gives it a lot more visibility and a lot more value in Google's eyes. Metadata of any length, any type, still impacts click-through rates, so make sure that you're updating those areas. Some of the areas get a bit more technical, but things like truncated documents, there's like a max token limit. Again, it gets a bit technical, but have a look into that if it's something that, if content's a big part of your business. And then authorship. Google actually stores and looks at authorship around that content. We'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later, but try to attribute the content that you create to specific authors when it comes to like creating author profiles around experts and things like that. So what we want to discuss really is top strategies to get your online store to rank. And what's really beautiful when it comes to SEO is that if you have the right tools and you have the right strategy, you can actually really get a lot of insights when you're looking into your competitors who are doing really well in the market. We look through SEO through 3 key areas of fluency, which are technical, relevance, and authority. Technical is about kind of the metadata, the code on the back end of the website. Content or relevance is about the site structure and the content itself. Domain authority is a measure of how popular the site is online. We'll go through each of these areas in quite a lot of detail and talk about the tools that we use to actually optimize for those areas. So we're going to go through a bit of a 3-step methodology in terms of how we look at ranking sites. So one of the great things, as I mentioned, when it comes to SEO is that you can get a really good blueprint of what your competitors are doing. One of the top tools in our industry is one called SEMrush. There's a free trial from that, and I think it's about $100 a month. But what you want to do is start with the end in mind. So have a look at in your market, who are the people who are ranking. Just type in the keywords and see for yourself. Pick the region, put the site in, remove their brand name so you're not getting irrelevant information. And then from there, you can see exactly what keyword are they targeting, where are they ranking, how much volume of search is that getting, what kind of page are they targeting. And what you want to do through this process is really document. Go through, see what multiple competitors are targeting, where you're doing, and then document that approach. I thought it might be helpful to see a visual representation of this. So this is a bit of buying behavior into the dress category. So we found that people search for dress in terms of things like type, length, color, a lot of different ways. But in the apparel or dress segment in particular, the occasion or length in particular played a really big role. So what that then tells us is it's not just about ranking for dress, but mini, maxi, midi, these types of variants are really important. Cocktail, casual, summer, things like that are really important. And why this is a good thing to focus on is that you're leaving money on the table if you're not understanding how individuals are searching within that segment. And that's a really great way to then bolster out the revenue opportunities that you have by improving that visibility. We helped do this for a client called Ali Fashion a couple of years ago, and in the span of 7 months, we were able to scale their online revenue from SEO from about $30,000 a month to $700,000 a month. So these types of activities really do play quite a big role. You can also use AI for keyword research as well. Just one thing I want to tell you is always double check, because AI does make errors, but it can also help speed up your workflow as well. So what you want to think about when you're using AI is, first of all, how you frame your prompts makes a really big difference. So things like you are an SEO expert, actually prompt that first, suggest some low competition keywords for the topic, women's dresses, rank them by popularity, present that information to me in a table. So the better that you learn how to do prompt engineering, you'll get a lot more useful information. You can see here some categories around summer, maxi, cocktail, plus size are quite important. You can also, like when you're looking at it around keyword research, you can also look at different variants around that category as well, but use it as a tool, but don't rely on it alone, but it can speed up your workflow quite a bit. And just a really kind of funny example from Reddit that illustrates how impactful prompts can be is the prompt here was salmon in the river, which technically this is salmon in the river. And I do think it looks quite nice and funny, but it's maybe not exactly what the person typing in that prompt was intending. Whereas if you look at this example here, Einstein and a cow on the left, again, maybe not what you're really looking for, whereas Einstein sitting next to a cow in a barn shot on a specific model with a lens, you get a really good output. So practice using the tool, and how you refine that, you'll get out of it what you put into it as well. The second step, now that we have a really good idea of what kind of keywords our competitors are targeting, From there, we want to look at replicating ideas around site structure and content when it comes to the website. So in particular, the structure of the site, the content quality plays a really big role. And let's have a look at what Google has to say when it comes to algorithm updates as well. Again, you can look at planning as well. So again, you're an SEO expert. What are good subcategories for dresses? It's doing a lot of that work for you. Look at your competitors, see how they've created their mega menu structure. That can give you a lot of insights, but you can use AI to speed up that workflow as well. We're still seeing content length really important. The average piece of content that ranks on the top 3 spots is about 1,960 words, which is a lot of words. And you might be thinking like, I'm here to shop for dresses or shoes or whatever it might be. I'm not here to read an essay. You don't have to have that visible to the end user. You can hide it in a truncated, expandable, and collapsible text box, but it will still impact SEO. But content is really important. The caveat to this is it's not just about a lot of content. And in fact, Google's saying we don't count your blog post. The takeaway here is that it really focuses on the quality side of things. And really, this is from Google directly, focus on creating quality rather than quantity, create something truly awesome, compelling, and insightful. So again, the content length plays a role, but just as important is making sure that you have the quality. There might be some questions in the room about what about AI generated content? And Google hasn't really properly answered the question as the truth. What they've said is that if you use it in a way to drive value to the end user, it's okay. But if you're just using it to copy and paste like kind of information, write 500 words about cutlery, and then you put that in your kind of cutlery subcategory page, there's 2 issues with that. Number one, that's not what Google rewards. Number 2, you're probably not the only person doing that. So you're going to have the same content as a lot of other people or very similar. Google, Microsoft can pick up on AI generated content. So how would you then use it? Let's say that you're writing content on protein powder. You may ask like, what are the common questions that people ask about protein powder? And then, do that research. You might then see the common types are whey protein isolate versus concentrate. Tell me the pros and cons of both. So that's how you want to use it to stimulate and educate the end user, but just direct copy and paste, it's not really going to work. In fact, Google had a manual update in March 2024, specifically to go after AI generated content called the unhelpful content update. So what should you actually do in terms of your content if you want to rank? What you want to look at is EEAT content. So EEAT stands for experience, expertise, authority, and trust. So when you're writing content, exude these pillars because that's what Google's rewarding from an SEO perspective. Why is this important? We've had clients like Scorp Tech outranking JB Hi-Fi for gaming PC. We have had a lot of clients like if you type in barbecue, you'll see a client barbecue store outranking barbecues galore, Bunnings. So these types of tactics can actually even help you take on some really big players within the industry. So let's look at those pillars specifically. Experience, look at first person oriented content, which is talking from the perspective of someone who's actually used or experienced that piece of content. I think Adore Beauty does that really well. And I've got an example from Dyson Corral from Adore Beauty on the right corner there. Expertise. So when you're looking at the content, you want to look at long form content that shows expertise in a particular topic. So if we delve into this page from Bulk Nutrients around protein powder, we have things like frequently asked questions, whey protein isolate, concentrate, which one's better? Again, genuinely useful content, not just spamming keywords like protein powder over and over again, but genuinely educating the market plays a really big role. Authority, not just links to content within your site, but even links to external content. So if you're looking at protein powder, you may have output from scientific reports or from the TGA or things like that that then help drive the authority of that content too. Reviews play a big role around the trust pillars. So having reviews actually put on that category page. You can also use schema markup, which you can see on the bottom there to have those stars come up. This is not a Google ad, even organic, you can have it come up. And using these strategies, we had about a 360% increase in organic revenue within 7 months for this particular client. Bulk Nutrients, which looks at kind of supplements and so forth as well. We did a really interesting study internally. So here we looked at over 600 Australian websites. We looked at over 100,000 data points, and we came with some really interesting insights around click-through rate. And what we found is that click-through rates are not identical across the whole market. In fact, they vary a lot depending on what industry you're in. As an example, you'll notice that if you're in position one for electronics, position one, you'll expect about 37% of the traffic, position five, about 10%. Whereas if you're in beauty, position one drops to about 17%. So, you're looking at about half the click-through rates, position one and position five, when you're looking at those industries. So a part of what you need to look at when you look at data is think about your industry specifically and make sure that it matches. So we do a lot of this kind of industry research to make sure that we're not missing the mark in terms of how we're forecasting. There's a lot of data here, so I'll just give you two big takeaways. If you're in e-commerce, the image schema and site links play a big role. If you don't know what that means, I'm going to show you in a second what I mean by that. But here's a really good example. So if you're looking at women's shoes, you can see little site links on the bottom around corporate shoes, wedding shoes, things like that. We've got images coming up as well. It's a really great way to boost the relevance, helps with the rankings themselves. And also, it helps with your click-through rate. So if you've got a low click-through rate in your industry, like in fashion, 26%, these can help you overcome the average aggregate data that you're seeing within the industry. You can also look at things like in-stock price schema, review schema. There's many, many different types of schema, but it's a way to enhance that content in a rich way. Cool. When you're looking at things like blog content as well, you can optimize it for something called featured snippet schema. So you can see here how to make tea, and then there's a output from T2, which is showing step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this can have a bit of that branding impact in addition to traffic to the website. Probably not a lot of sales coming from it, but more from a branding perspective. Here's an example from Vodafone, how to call the UK from Australia. This was actually a really good commercial example. It helped drive up a lot of prepaid sales for international travelers and things like that too. So now, sorry, getting a bit of a delay. There we go. So now that we have a really good idea what kind of keywords our competitors are targeting, how to structure the website, things like that, the final aspect is looking at domain authority. And domain authority all has to do with what kind of links are being built to the website, what quality are they, what velocity are they. The quality does play a big role. We always come back to the data, and when I was speaking last year, we were doing it just based on looking at our internal data and external studies where we're seeing that links still do have a direct correlation with ranking. If we now look at Google's API link in May, it actually confirms this exactly, that Google still does look at links and links do still matter. There's a lot of debate in the industry, but yeah, the internal engineering documents do show that it's important, and our data supports that as well. When it comes to looking at links, the tool that we use is one called Ahrefs. So it's a bit like SEMrush, and you can put in competitors, but here you can see exactly what kind of links the competitors are building, what velocity they have, what kind of anchor text are they using. But in short, you can use these tools to reverse engineer what Google is rewarding, identify what Google's rewarding, and utilize that to then see how can I actually build links for my own site. One of the tips that we found has worked really well was for a client called Booty. So with Booty, their main segment was the bamboo fashion segment, but they wanted to go mainstream men's underwear, women's underwear, but there the competition is fierce. It's like Calvin Klein, Meyer, Bonds, things like that. So one of the tactics that works really well from our experience is looking at targeted link building specifically to the category page that you're looking to rank. So really good tactic when you're looking at link building. Cool. And yeah, look, within a period of about 11, 12 months, it took a while, but we're able to increase their year-on-year sales by about 65% through these types of tactics. Now, why does all of this matter? It's because it drives real results. Calvin Klein, within the first 6 months of the campaign, we had a 500% increase in year-on-year sales, but this is not just for the Calvin Kleins of the world. If we go back to that example of Scorp Tech, who we outranked JD Hi-Fi, within the first 12 months, we drove an additional growth in incremental sales, not total sales, but growth in sales of over $10 million just from SEO alone. So I would encourage you to take these learnings and see if there's ways that you can apply it in your own business as well to help kind of drive that scale. At OMG, we actually look after things like paid media as well. So specialize in Google Ads, Meta, TikTok, these types of channel. We've been highly awarded in these areas. We have a team of about 200 based in Sydney and Crow's Nest. We work with some really cool clients, but not just enterprise. We do a lot of work in the small to medium business space as well. But just as a thank you for everyone who's come along to the session, we have a special offer around an audit. So we have some of our team members in the back that you could scan if you'd like to take up that offer. I've put a code up here as well if that's convenient for you. We also do have a booth 121, which no one will remember. So I put next to eBay, which is quite visible. So we're just next to eBay. So if you'd like to come along and have a chat with us, please feel free to do so.